The glow of the Christmas lights reflected softly off the glassware as I cleared the table. My son, Ethan, and his wife, Clara, lingered at the dining table, sipping wine and exchanging looks that felt rehearsed. The warmth of the evening, filled with roast turkey and old family stories, suddenly seemed to cool around me. "You really went all out this year, Dad?" Ethan said, his tone polite but distracted. He stood, stacking plates a little too quickly. His elbow brushed the corner of my old leather briefcase on the side table. It tumbled over, spilling papers across the hardwood floor like a sudden windstorm. "Damn it," I muttered, kneeling to gather them before anyone could see. But Clara was already leaning forward, curiosity gleaming in her eyes like a cat catching movement in the dark. "What's this?" Ethan asked, picking up one of the papers before I could stop him. His voice caught. "Dad, this says—" He didn't finish. His eyes were locked on the top line. "Estate of Harold Bennett, transfer of assets. $12 million. Clara's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down very gently. $12 million? She repeated, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as glass. I reached for the papers. "It's just paperwork. Nothing for you to worry about." Ethan's face drained of color. "You inherited $12 million? "Yes," I said, finally exhaling. "My brother Harold passed away 3 months ago. His estate just cleared last week." For a moment no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Then Clara smiled, too wide, too deliberate. "What a blessing," she said sweetly. "You must feel so secure now." Ethan didn't smile. He just stared at the table, his fingers drumming nervously. "You didn't tell me about this, Dad." "Why? Because it wasn't relevant to you?" I said, stacking the papers into a neat pile. "It's mine to decide what to do with." Clara's tone softened, but her eyes hardened. "Robert, you've worked hard all your life. Don't you think your family deserves to share in your good fortune? We could invest it, help with the kids' college, maybe even move into a better neighborhood." Ethan nodded, still avoiding my gaze. "You don't need all that money, Dad. You're 70. You've already lived your life. We still have ours ahead." The words hit me like ice water. My son, my only child, speaking about my life as if it were already over. I looked at them both, really looked. Clara's perfectly composed smile, her diamond earrings catching the light. Ethan's nervous, almost ashamed expression. "So," I said slowly, "you think I should just hand it over?" "Not hand over," Clara said quickly. "Share. Family helps family, after all." "Family," I echoed, setting the papers on the table. Interesting word. I don't remember family calling me selfish when I said I couldn't fund a second vacation last year. Her smile flickered. That was different. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, deep and deliberate. The air in the room felt heavy, like the seconds themselves were judging us. "This isn't an appropriate conversation for Christmas," I said, rising from my chair. "You're staying the night, I assume?" Clara and Ethan exchanged a glance that I didn't like, silent, but filled with meaning. "Of course," she said, smiling again. "We have a lot more to talk about." Later, lying awake in my bed, I couldn't shake the memory of her tone. The way she said "we" instead of "you." The way Ethan had agreed so easily. The house creaked in the cold, an old structure settling into the night. Then, faintly, through the thin ceiling above my room, I heard voices. Clara's voice, sharp and cutting. That old man doesn't deserve that kind of money. It should be ours. My blood froze. Keep your voice down, Ethan hissed. I'm right, she snapped. He's lived his life. We're drowning in bills while he hoards $12 million. It's not fair. The floorboards groaned as she paced above me. We'll convince him, she said, her tone turning calculating. And if he refuses, there are other ways. He's old. People might start to think he's losing it. I sat there in the dark, my heart thudding in my chest, staring up at the ceiling. My son and his wife, plotting to take everything from me. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, something in me had changed. The man they thought was weak and sentimental was gone. What replaced him was someone colder, sharper, and very much awake. Because if they wanted to play a game of greed, they were about to learn what it cost to underestimate me. But when I sat down at breakfast that morning, Clara's next move proved she wasn't just greedy. She was dangerous. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm that hasn't finished yet. I brewed a pot of coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen, but it tasted like ash on my tongue. Every word from the night before kept replaying in my head. They thought I was old, weak, an obstacle standing between them and the money. The clock struck 7 when I heard footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets, deliberate, practiced. Clara entered first, perfectly put together as if the night's conversation had never happened. She wore a soft cream sweater, her hair tied back in a way that made her look innocent. Her mask was flawless. "Good morning, Robert," she said, using my first name now, not Dad. "You're up early." Ethan followed behind, looking exhausted but avoiding my eyes. "Morning," he muttered, rubbing his neck. I nodded toward the coffee pot. "There's enough for everyone." Clara smiled like a woman walking onto a stage. "This big house must get lonely sometimes," she began, her voice smooth and deliberate. "All these rooms, just you in them." "I manage," I said, sipping my coffee. "We were thinking," she continued, sliding into the chair across from me, "about last night, about your inheritance." I didn't answer. I wanted to see how far she'd go. "Ethan and I talked for a long time," she said sweetly. "You've always been generous, Robert. Always put family first. So we thought, maybe it's time to make some plans together." "Plans?" I repeated. "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "You could help us. The kids' future. Maybe invest a little. We could even manage it for you." "Manage it for me?" I said, setting down my cup. Clara's voice was honeyed, but the poison was underneath. "Well, you don't really need all $12 million, do you? At your age. What would you even do with that kind of money?" I stared at her. "And you think you'd make better use of it?" She leaned forward, eyes bright. "Of course. We could build something lasting. Buy a bigger house. Start a business. Secure the children's education. You'd be helping the next generation. Isn't that what family does?" I let the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably. "You mean I'd be helping you?" I said finally. Ethan spoke up then, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, it's not like that. We just think. Think I'm too old to know what to do with my own money?" I interrupted. Clara's smile twitched. "That's not what we're saying." "It's exactly what you're saying." The air grew heavy again. The Christmas decorations looked ridiculous now. Tinsel and cheer in a room filled with greed. "You both think that because I've spent my life being careful, being generous, that makes me easy to manipulate," I said. You're wrong. Clara's tone hardened, just slightly. We're not manipulating anyone, Robert. We're talking about fairness. We've been struggling for years while you live comfortably. It's only right that you help your family. Right? I echoed. Tell me something, Clara. How much is right? Half? All of it? Enough for a new car? A new life? Her jaw tightened. Don't twist this. No, I said quietly. I think I'm finally seeing things clearly. Ethan looked torn, caught between his father and his wife. Dad, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not the one making it hard. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then I stood, gathering my coffee cup. This conversation is over, I said, turning toward the sink. Clara rose too, her composure slipping. You can't just shut us out. We're family. You owe us at least that. I turned, meeting her gaze. I don't owe you anything. Not my brother's money, not my peace, and certainly not my respect. Her mask cracked completely. Fine, she hissed. But don't be surprised when people start asking questions about your sudden fortune, about whether you're really capable of handling it. Ethan flinched. Clara, she ignored him. You're not as sharp as you used to be, Robert. Maybe someone should be looking out for you. I stepped closer, my voice calm but cold. Careful, Clara. You're walking on thin ice, and I built the lake. She stared at me for a long moment before turning on her heel and walking out, her heels clicking like gunshots on the hardwood floor. Ethan lingered behind, shame written all over his face. Dad, Go, I said quietly. Before you say something you'll regret. He hesitated, then followed her. When the door finally closed, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the window's reflection. For the first time in years, I didn't see a tired old man. I saw someone who'd been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. But when a knock came at my door that afternoon, I realized Clara wasn't done. She was just getting started. The winter afternoon sun was fading when the knock came. 3 short taps, polite, practiced, followed by the faint jingle of Clara's bracelets. I took a deep breath before opening the door. Clara stood there with a tray of muffins and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thought you might want some company, she said sweetly. You looked so lonely this morning. Behind her, Ethan lingered, hands shoved into his coat pockets, looking like a boy caught between 2 worlds. Come in, I said evenly. I wanted to see what game she was playing now. They followed me into the living room, Clara's heels clicking against the hardwood like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. She placed the tray on the coffee table, the scent of artificial blueberry filling the air. I've been thinking, she said, settling onto the sofa. Maybe we started off on the wrong foot. You've always been generous to us, and it's unfair to make you feel like we're demanding anything. That's good to hear, I said cautiously. She smiled again, soft, practiced. We just want what's best for everyone. Maybe we could help you manage things. Taxes, investments, that sort of thing. There are professionals who could guide you. Professionals? I asked. Yes, she said too quickly. You know, accountants, advisors. We could handle the paperwork for you, just to take the pressure off. I studied her face. She was rehearsing this, every word carefully placed. And whose names would be on that paperwork? Her lashes fluttered. Well, ours, of course, just for convenience. Ethan finally spoke up, his voice unsteady. Dad, she's just trying to help. I turned toward him. Are you? He faltered. You know Clara's good with finances. No, I said sharply. I know Clara's good at convincing people to give her what she wants. The air went cold. Clara's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. That's not fair. Fair, I said, leaning forward. Fair is 30 years of paying for your rent, your cars, your broken promises. Fair is watching my son call me selfish after I gave up my own retirement to help him buy his house. You don't get to talk about fair. Clara's eyes darkened. For the first time, the sweetness drained away, replaced by something sharp and unguarded. You think this is about money? You've spent your life controlling him with handouts and guilt. We're just trying to take back some independence. By stealing mine? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner, loud and steady, marking each second like a heartbeat. Ethan sat frozen, his eyes darting between us. Clara finally stood. You know what? You're right. We shouldn't talk about this anymore. Maybe other people should decide what's best for you. The words landed like a knife. Other people? I asked, my voice calm but dangerous. Oh, don't look so worried, she said, that fake sweetness returning. There are legal ways to make sure you're taken care of. I knew then that she'd said it on purpose. She wanted me to ask questions, to react. But I didn't. I just watched as she walked to the door, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke. Ethan followed her reluctantly, pausing at the threshold. Dad, please don't take this the wrong way. Clara just worries about you. Then tell her to worry about herself, I said, shutting the door firmly. When their car pulled out of the driveway, I locked the door and went straight to my study. I opened my old filing cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled Estate. Inside were my brother's documents, his will, the asset list, the contact for my attorney. I scanned through them slowly, every line a reminder of just how much money was at stake, and just how far someone like Clara might go to get it. I placed the papers back carefully and turned off the light. But as I passed the window, something outside caught my eye. Their car, parked halfway down the street. They hadn't left. Through the dim glow of the streetlight, I could just make out their silhouettes. They were arguing, Clara gesturing wildly, Ethan trying to calm her down. Then she pulled out her phone. I watched, heart pounding, as she dialed and started speaking animatedly. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the look on her face. Triumph. Whatever she was planning, it wasn't over. When the car finally drove away, I stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness. The neighborhood was quiet again, but I could feel it, the beginning of something dangerous. By morning, I decided to visit my lawyer. If Clara wanted a legal fight, I would be ready, because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, pride, and the one thing they didn't think I still had, control. But when I reached my lawyer's office the next day, the papers waiting on his desk weren't mine. They were Clara's. The next morning, frost clung to the edges of my window like a warning. I dressed slowly, deliberately, the way soldiers do before walking into battle. Clara's last words from the night before kept echoing in my head. There are legal ways to make sure you're taken care of. By the time I stepped into my lawyer's office, I had convinced myself it was paranoia. Maybe she was bluffing. Maybe I was overthinking. But the look on Mr. Graham's face when I entered told me otherwise. Robert, he said, rising from his chair. I was about to call you. Something cold coiled in my stomach. Why? What's happened? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid a thick envelope across the table. Read this, he said softly. The seal was official, the kind of crisp paper you only see in courtrooms and nightmares. Across the top, bold black letters, petition for determination of incapacity. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I flipped the pages, scanning the words that blurred before my eyes. Petitioners, Ethan Bennett and Clara Bennett. Respondent, Robert Bennett. Allegation, exhibiting signs of cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, and susceptibility to undue influence. They're saying I'm incompetent? I asked quietly. Graham nodded grimly. Yes, they're attempting to have you declared legally incapable of handling your own finances. My hands trembled as I turned another page. Witness statements. Mrs. Langford, my neighbor, apparently told the court she'd seen me talking to myself in the yard. Mr. Keller, the mailman, claimed I'd forgotten my mailbox key for weeks. All lies. Fabricated, rehearsed lies. At the bottom of the packet, a paragraph glared up at me like a final insult. To prevent further financial harm, petitioners request temporary control of Robert Bennett's assets until the court's determination. My throat went dry. They've frozen my accounts? Half of them, Graham said. Checking, savings, and the smaller investment portfolio. They'll argue it's for your own protection until a ruling is made. I sank into the chair, the room spinning slightly. My own son, I whispered. He actually signed this? Yes, Graham said quietly. Both of them did. Silence filled the room, thick, suffocating. For decades, I'd given Ethan everything he'd ever asked for. Paid his tuition, covered his debts, helped him buy a house. And now he was trying to take away the one thing left that defined me, my independence. Graham leaned forward. Robert, listen to me carefully. They've made a critical mistake. I looked up, my hands still shaking. What mistake? They underestimated you, he said firmly. This petition is riddled with inconsistencies, false witnesses, a doctor's evaluation that doesn't exist. We can dismantle this, but we'll need evidence. Records, documentation, proof that you're perfectly sound of mind. I nodded slowly, my thoughts beginning to sharpen. Years of working as an engineer had trained me to think systematically under pressure. If this was a battle, I'd fight it like one, with precision, patience, and proof. Start with your finances, Graham continued. We'll show your bank statements, your tax returns, your investment reports. The cleaner the trail, the stronger the defense. And what about the doctor? I asked. They've included a statement from a Dr. Lillian Cole. I've never even met her. Graham's lips tightened. We'll verify her credentials. If she's falsified a medical report, that's fraud, and it'll destroy their case. I nodded again, standing slowly. Thank you, Graham. I'll bring everything by this afternoon. As I stepped outside, the cold January air slapped my face, but it cleared my mind. This wasn't about protecting my money anymore. This was about survival. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the steering wheel. Every red light, every turn of the road, brought back flashes of memory. Ethan as a boy, his first bike, his first heartbreak, his graduation day. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being his father and become his wallet. When I reached home, I went straight to the study and opened the filing cabinet. Receipts, contracts, bank statements going back years. Every transaction, every dollar sent to Ethan, every promise to repay. I stacked them neatly in a folder labeled Proof. Then, for the first time in weeks, I felt something like control returning. But just as I sat down to organize the next batch, My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Maybe it's time to let go, old man. You can't win this. We're only doing what's best for you. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew that voice, it was Clara's. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a reply, because I already knew what to do next. They wanted a legal war, and now I was going to give them one. But as I began gathering evidence, I discovered something far worse. Clara's entire case was built on a doctor who didn't even exist. By the time I reached home, the day's pale light had faded into the steel gray of early evening. The house felt heavier than usual, like it knew what was coming. I placed the thick folder of financial records on my desk and powered up my computer. The soft hum of the machine steadied me. Numbers and order were my weapons now. I began scanning everything: tax returns, investment reports, loan records, property deeds. Every decimal point was a bullet against the lies Ethan and Clara had fired at me. When the files were neatly arranged, I opened my email and typed one line to my lawyer. Mr. Graham, I have evidence ready, but we need to verify the doctor listed in their petition. Dr. Lillian Cole. He replied in under 5 minutes. Already looking into it. Something feels off about her credentials. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the screen. Something feels off was an understatement. I'd spent a lifetime around data and patterns, and this whole setup had the chaotic fingerprints of desperation all over it. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Robert, Graham said without preamble. You're going to want to sit down for this. I already am. She's not real, he said flatly. There is a Dr. Lillian Cole licensed in Oregon, a pediatrician. But the document in your case lists her as a geriatric psychiatrist from Seattle. There's no such listing in any national registry. For a moment I couldn't speak. So they forged medical evidence. Exactly. And whoever helped them did a poor job covering the trail. The address they used for her clinic is a vacant office lot. I've already contacted the state board to confirm. I exhaled slowly. That's enough to crush their case, isn't it? It's more than that, Graham said. It's fraud. Criminal if we pursue it. My hand tightened around the phone. Fraud. The same word I'd spent my life avoiding. I'd built everything I had through honest work, careful planning, slow growth, and now my own family had turned to forgery to take it from me. Graham, I said quietly, file the motion. I want every piece of that false evidence exposed. He hesitated. Are you sure you want to go that far? Once we start this, there's no turning back. It'll destroy your son's marriage, possibly his career. He already destroyed my trust, I said. I'm just returning the favor. When I hung up, the silence that followed was almost comforting. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting, I was planning. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and typed the title, Operation Ledger. If they wanted to play legal chess, I'd play to win. I began listing every loan I'd ever made to Ethan and Clara. College tuition, $40,000. Living expenses during unemployment, $25,000. Down payment for their home, $120,000. Emergency funds, temporary loans, unpaid help, $210,000. The total stopped me cold. $395,000. Every penny documented. Every transaction accounted for. If Clara wanted a courtroom war, I'd counterclaim for every dollar I'd ever handed them. But beyond the numbers, something deeper stirred inside me. A quiet fury that didn't burn hot, but cold and sharp. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, generosity for gullibility. They were about to learn the difference. At midnight, I received another call from Graham. His voice carried a new energy, something almost triumphant. "We've got them, Robert. The signature on that forged report? It matches Clara's handwriting from the mortgage assistance forms you co-signed 5 years ago." I had a handwriting analyst verify it. I couldn't help but smile. "You mean the same elegant curls she uses to sign birthday cards?" "The very same," he said. "We'll file a motion to dismiss and a criminal complaint by tomorrow afternoon. Once the court sees this, they'll realize who's actually lost their grip on reality." For the first time in months, I felt my lungs fill properly. The knot in my chest loosened. "Thank you, Graham," I said quietly. "But let's not stop there. What do you have in mind?" "I want to make sure they can't pull this again. Prepare a full audit of every financial transfer I've ever made to Ethan. Loans, gifts, everything. I want to document their dependency completely." He chuckled softly. "I like the way you think, Robert. You're turning this into a full-scale counteroffensive." "I'm just tired of being their ATM," I said. "It's time they learn the cost of greed." After hanging up, I sat back, staring at the dark window. The reflection that stared back at me wasn't the same man from Christmas Eve. Not the forgiving father who believed love could fix everything. This man understood leverage, and I had plenty of it. The following morning, I arrived at Graham's office with 3 binders under my arm, decades of meticulous financial records. His secretary's eyes widened when she saw the stacks. "Evidence," I told her. "Years of it." Graham flipped through the first binder, whistling low. "Robert, you've practically written our defense and our counterclaim." "Good," I said, "because I want to go on offense." He nodded. "Then we start tomorrow. By the time they realize what's happening, they'll be the ones explaining themselves to a judge." I smiled faintly. "Perfect. Let them think they've won a little longer. The fall will hurt more that way." But just as my confidence returned, Clara made her boldest move yet. She took the war public. Perfect. Now the story turns from a private war to a public humiliation campaign, showing Clara's manipulative side and Robert's quiet counterattack. The morning after Graham filed our motion, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Text after text flooded in. Neighbors, old friends, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "Robert, is it true what Clara's saying? Please tell me this isn't real. How could you do that to your family?" Confused, I opened my messages and clicked the first link someone had sent me. Took me straight to Facebook. Clara's post sat at the top of my feed, already shared more than 50 times. Her profile picture showed her and Ethan smiling sadly, the perfect portrait of wounded innocence. The caption above the post read, "Heartbroken to share this, but please pray for our family. My father-in-law inherited millions, yet refuses to help his struggling family. While he lives comfortably, our children go hungry and our electricity gets shut off. We've tried everything to reason with him, but he's changed. Angry, unstable, and cruel. Sometimes the people you trust most hurt you the worst. Please keep us in your thoughts." Below it were 3 photos. An empty refrigerator, a stack of unpaid bills, and 2 children, my grandchildren, sitting at a kitchen table, heads bowed as if in prayer. Except those photos weren't from this week. They were old, staged years ago when Ethan lost his job briefly, before I helped them catch up. The comments underneath burned like acid. "How heartless. He must have lost his mind. Money makes monsters. I could practically hear Clara's voice in each one. Every comment exactly what she wanted people to believe. By noon, the gossip had already spread through the neighborhood. When I went to the grocery store, conversations stopped mid-sentence. A woman I'd known for 20 years pretended not to see me. Even the cashier, usually friendly, just scanned my items in silence, eyes darting away. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and scrolled through the post again, my jaw tightening. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a smear campaign. Clara had turned my quiet life into a public circus. She was poisoning my reputation to win sympathy before the court date. And worse, she was using my grandchildren as weapons. My phone buzzed again. A call from Margaret, my neighbor of 15 years. "Robert," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw Clara's post. Is it true? The pictures, the children." "Margaret," I said calmly, "have you seen Emma and Jack lately?" "Well, no," she admitted. "But they looked so sad in those photos." "They're old photos, Margaret," I said firmly. "From years ago, when Ethan lost his job for a few weeks. They've been fine ever since." Silence. Then, softly, "Oh my God, I think she's fooling everyone." "Yes," I said, staring out the window. "But not for long." That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I studied Clara's post like it was a crime scene. Every timestamp, every photo, every line of text, all data points for my counterattack. I opened her profile and scrolled backward. Just 2 weeks earlier, she'd posted pictures from a spa weekend. Before that, a designer handbag easily worth $1,000. And just last month, photos from a beach trip with the caption, "Finally living our best life again." The hypocrisy was staggering. I began taking screenshots. Every post, every inconsistency, every proof of her lavish spending. Then I opened a new folder on my computer, Evidence, Public Deception. By midnight, I had nearly 50 screenshots and a chronological log of every lie. Her narrative was crumbling. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I sent everything to Graham. He called within the hour, laughing in disbelief. "She's handed us everything, Robert. Every contradiction is a nail in her coffin." "Let's not use it yet," I said. "Let her dig deeper. People like Clara can't stop once they start lying." He paused. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I'm not playing," I said quietly. "I'm teaching." By the end of the week, Clara's post had gone viral in our town. Ethan's co-workers had seen it. Parents from the kids' school were whispering. And yet, every lie she told was another line of evidence for me. Then, on Friday afternoon, I received a message from an old friend, Jim, the head of our local neighborhood association. "Robert, you should come to next week's community meeting. Clara requested a segment to talk about elder abuse awareness. Sounds like she's planning something big." I smiled, slow, grim, certain. Of course she was. Clara never fought fair. But this time, she was stepping onto a battlefield where truth had the louder voice, mine. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of scotch, and sat in the dim kitchen light. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. I was calm. Because when you know someone's about to destroy themselves, all you have to do is stand still and let them swing. At the community meeting the following week, Clara took center stage. But when I stood up afterward, the truth tore her world apart. "Perfect, okay, hand, we've reached the turning point of the story. This is the moment Clara's lies crumble in front of everyone." The town's community center hadn't seen this kind of turnout in years. Every folding chair was filled. The air buzzed with the strange electricity that only gossip and scandal can create. I sat quietly in the back row, my folder of evidence balanced on my lap, while Clara fluttered around the front like a queen preparing for coronation. She dressed for sympathy. Soft blue sweater, minimal makeup, eyes slightly reddened as if she'd been crying. Even her voice trembled as she greeted neighbors. "Thank you all for coming," she said sweetly. "It's been such a hard few months for our family." Ethan stood beside her, pale and silent. His shoulders slumped, the look of a man who'd realized too late that the fire he helped start was now out of control. When the meeting began, Margaret, the association chair, welcomed everyone and announced the topic: Elder Abuse Awareness, presented by Clara Bennett. The phrase hit like a bullet, and I felt several people turn toward me, whispering. Clara began her speech with the practiced rhythm of someone who'd rehearsed in the mirror 100 times. She spoke of betrayal, greed, and neglect. She gestured to a display of photos, the same staged refrigerator, the same children pretending to look hungry. Each word dripped with false compassion. "My father-in-law," she said solemnly, "inherited millions and became a different person, suspicious, paranoid. He refuses to help his own grandchildren. We've tried to get him medical care, but he won't listen. It's heartbreaking." Murmurs filled the room. I could see heads nodding, faces softening. She had them wrapped around her finger again. Then she lifted a folder dramatically. "I have proof," she announced. "Bank statements showing his wealth, medical reports documenting his cognitive decline, and witness testimonies from concerned neighbors." She held up the forged documents, waving them like trophies. People gasped. A few glared at me. "Mr. Bennett," said Margaret cautiously from the front, "would you like to respond?" I stood slowly. Every eye followed me as I carried my folder to the podium. Clara stepped aside, her smile smug and confident, like she'd already won. "Thank you, Margaret," I said, my voice calm. "And thank you, everyone, for listening. It's important we talk about elder abuse, especially when it's real." A ripple moved through the crowd. Clara frowned. "Excuse me?" I opened my folder. "You're absolutely right, Clara. Abuse can take many forms. Emotional, financial, even legal." She folded her arms, defensive now. "Robert, this isn't the time for—" "Oh, but it is," I said, holding up the first document. "You mentioned my bank statements. Here are the actual ones. 5 years of transactions showing I've transferred over $70,000 to you and Ethan for emergencies." Gasps. I placed the pages on the table. "This," I continued, "is the check I wrote for your house down payment. $120,000. You called it a loan, remember?" Whispers spread like wildfire. Clara's voice rose. "Those were gifts." "Were they?" I asked, pulling out the next binder. "Because I have signed receipts from Ethan labeling each one as temporary assistance, including the funds for your car, your medical bills, and your credit card debt." The murmurs turned into open conversation now. Disbelief, outrage, curiosity. Margaret looked between us, frowning deeply. "And you mentioned medical reports," I said, lifting another sheet. "The supposed evaluation by Dr. Lillian Cole, who you claimed diagnosed me with dementia. She doesn't exist. The signature on that report." I turned to the audience. "It matches Clara's handwriting exactly, verified by a licensed forensic analyst." A collective gasp rolled through the room. Clara's mask cracked. "That's ridiculous." You're lying. Am I? I asked, connecting my laptop to the projector. Within seconds, her Facebook photos lit up the screen: vacations, designer bags, spa trips, and dinners at expensive restaurants. March 3rd, Cabo vacation, I said. Same week you told everyone you couldn't afford groceries. June 12th, new handbag, $900 retail. You posted that while claiming you couldn't pay for electricity. Each slide hit harder than the last. The audience shifted uneasily. The tide had turned. Margaret finally spoke, her tone firm. Clara, is there an explanation for this? Clara looked around wildly, her confidence gone. Those posts were old. You don't understand. But no one was listening anymore. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. Clara, stop. She shook him off. No, he's manipulating everyone again. This is what he does. I closed the laptop. No, Clara. What I've done is tell the truth. You lied to this community, forged legal documents, and tried to destroy my name. All because you couldn't stand the idea that someone else's success didn't belong to you. For a long, unbearable moment, the room was silent. Then Margaret said quietly, I think we've heard enough. People began murmuring apologies, avoiding Clara's gaze. A few approached me, embarrassed, whispering, We're sorry, Robert. We didn't know. Clara grabbed her bag and stormed out, shoving past chairs, tears streaking her carefully painted face. Ethan followed a few steps behind, his expression hollow. As the door slammed behind them, the applause began, hesitant at first, then stronger. I didn't smile. Victory felt heavy, not sweet. I'd cleared my name, but in doing so, I'd buried the last pieces of what little family I had left. Margaret approached me quietly. Robert, she said softly, I think there's something else you should know. Something Clara's been saying about you outside these meetings. I turned to her slowly. What kind of something? She hesitated. The kind that might make you call your lawyer again. Because what Clara had done next wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. Perfect. We're entering the final act of this story, where Robert's calm, methodical revenge begins to unfold. I left the community hall to a round of reluctant applause and whispered apologies. But none of it mattered. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of gravel crunching beneath my tires, a rhythm that matched the thoughts pounding in my head. Clara had gone too far this time, and Margaret's warning echoed over and over, the kind of thing that might make you call your lawyer again. When I got home, I found out what she meant. A thick envelope was waiting on my doorstep, no return address. I carried it inside, slid it open, and froze. Inside were court papers stamped and signed. Anderson versus Bennett. Civil petition for financial recovery. Filed by Clara and Ethan. I skimmed the opening line, my pulse thudding louder with each word. The petitioners claim financial exploitation by the respondent, who manipulated their finances and withheld promised funds over several years. In short, they were accusing me of stealing from them. I laughed once, a sound without humor. Unbelievable. But the more I read, the colder my anger became. They'd claimed I'd promised them inheritance advances, that I'd made verbal agreements to transfer money, that I'd taken advantage of their dependency. It was all fiction, but dressed up in just enough half-truths to sound credible. And the worst part? They'd attached screenshots of our text messages. Clipped, edited, twisted. It was a perfect trap. If I hadn't spent years keeping records, they might have won. But they'd forgotten who they were dealing with. I called Graham immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Robert, I just saw it," he said. "They filed it this morning. They're doubling down. They're digging their own grave," I said coldly. "Tell me what we can do." "Plenty," Graham replied. "We have the financial binders, the loan records, and every transaction with signatures. You've practically kept forensic evidence for 30 years. We'll counterclaim fraud, defamation, and malicious prosecution." I smiled faintly. "Good. Let's make it hurt." That night, I sat in my study surrounded by paperwork, binders, contracts, bank slips, the quiet evidence of a lifetime's generosity. I'd always thought my precision and organization were habits of an old man trying to stay busy. Now I realized they were armor. Every dollar I'd ever lent Ethan had a paper trail. Every favor had a receipt. Every lie they told could be crushed beneath the weight of proof. By morning, I was back in Graham's office. He had already drafted the counteraction. Bennett versus Bennett, motion for recovery of outstanding personal loans. Total claimed debt, $412,000 plus accrued interest. Graham looked up from his desk, his expression grim but satisfied. "This isn't revenge, Robert. It's justice. You're reclaiming what you gave freely to people who weaponized your kindness." "I'm aware," I said, my voice calm, "but let's not pretend it doesn't feel good." He allowed himself a smile. "I'll file it within the hour." As I left the office, I passed a newsstand outside. A small-town paper headline caught my eye. "Local family torn apart by inheritance battle." There was a photo of me, grainy, taken from the community meeting beside one of Clara, pretending to cry. I bought the paper, folded it neatly, and dropped it into a trash bin. That evening, while I was pouring a cup of tea, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Robert Bennett?" a man's voice asked. "Yes. This is Detective Marcus with Spokane PD. We received a report regarding forged medical documentation in a civil petition filed under your name. Would you be available to provide a statement?" I blinked. "Wait, Clara filed that case here. You're saying it's under investigation?" "Yes, sir," he said. "A handwriting expert submitted analysis tying the false signature to a petitioner. We just need your confirmation of events." A slow smile spread across my face. "Detective, I'll come in first thing tomorrow." After the call, I sat in the dark for a long while. For months, Clara had turned lies into weapons, but now the truth had finally sharpened its own blade. Later that night, my phone rang again, this time from a familiar number. "Ethan." For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "Dad?" His voice cracked. "Clara's losing it. She said the police called her today. They have questions about that doctor." "What's happening?" "What's happening," I said evenly, "is that you're finally learning that greed comes with consequences." He went silent. Then softly, "I didn't want this to go so far." "But you let it," I said. "You signed your name beside hers. You called me unstable. You froze my accounts. You stood by while your wife tore my name apart." "Dad, please." "No," I interrupted. "You wanted independence, Ethan. You wanted to prove you didn't need me. Consider this your chance." I hung up before he could answer. For a long moment, I sat in my quiet kitchen, the ticking clock my only company. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, covering the footprints from this morning's mail delivery. Soft, erasing, forgiving. But some things shouldn't be erased. Some debts deserve to be remembered. Tomorrow, Clara and Ethan would receive their official notice. 30 days to repay $400,000. Or face bankruptcy and criminal investigation. But when Clara showed up at my door one final time, broken, desperate, and furious, she wasn't there to beg. She was there to threaten. It was just after midnight when I heard it, the sound that had started everything months ago. 3 short knocks on my front door. Not hurried, not polite, just deliberate. I froze halfway down the hallway, my pulse steady but sharp. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Clara. Through the frosted glass, her silhouette wavered under the porch light. Her hair was disheveled, coat unbuttoned, eyes wide with something between rage and panic. I opened the door slowly, just enough for the cold night air to seep in. "Robert," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I studied her face. No makeup this time, no mask of charm. Just exhaustion. Her voice was thin and raw, but her hands were clenched into fists. "Talk about what?" I asked. "The lies? The forged documents? The police investigation?" She flinched but didn't back down. "You're ruining our lives. You think this makes you right, but you're destroying your own son." "No," I said quietly. "I'm saving him from you." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think he'll thank you for that? He hates you. He says you've always treated him like a child. He blames you for everything." I didn't answer. That wasn't news, but hearing it spoken aloud still hurt. Clara stepped closer. "You want to win, fine. You've made your point. But drop the police complaint. You don't know what they'll do to me. I can't face consequences." I finished for her. "Welcome to adulthood, Clara." Her eyes flickered with fury. "You smug old man. You think this is victory? Look at you. Sitting alone in this cold house, surrounded by papers and ghosts. You'll die alone, Robert. That's your punishment." I let the silence sit between us for a long moment. The wind outside howled faintly against the eaves. Then I said quietly, "You're wrong about one thing. I didn't do any of this to win. I did it because you left me no choice." She laughed sharp, brittle. "Oh, please. You loved it. You've been waiting your whole life to pull the strings, to feel important again. Admit it." I stepped aside, letting her see the stacks of binders on my table. Years of ledgers, receipts, and memories. "This isn't power, Clara. It's proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that every time I gave, you took more. Proof that kindness without limits turns into self-destruction." Her expression faltered just for a second, but she recovered fast. "You think anyone cares about your proof? People believe stories, Robert. And I can still tell a better one than you." "Not anymore," I said evenly. "Your doctor doesn't exist. Your social media lies are archived. And your forged report? It's in the hands of the police. They'll handle your story now." Her breathing quickened. "You can't do this." "I already have." Her face changed. The fear turned to desperation, and in that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she said the words that made the air around us turn cold. "You think this ends with you, old man? You think Ethan will ever forgive you after I'm gone?" Something about the way she said gone made me tense. "Clara," I said carefully, "what are you talking about?" She laughed quietly, but it wasn't laughter. It was something cracked, hollow. "You win. Congratulations. You get your piece. But you won't get him back." She turned and walked down the steps, her figure disappearing into the dark, snow swirling around her. I stood frozen at the door, watching until the taillights vanished at the end of the road. For a long time, I couldn't move. Her words kept echoing in my head. You won't get him back. The next morning, I called Graham immediately. We need to contact the police, I said. Something's wrong. He didn't argue. Within hours, officers arrived at Clara and Ethan's house. Ethan answered the door, pale, shaken. Clara was gone. Her car missing. Her phone left behind on the kitchen counter. The detectives told me they'd issue a missing person report, but from the look in their eyes, I knew what they were thinking. She didn't disappear. She ran. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear of arrest. Maybe it was both. Days turned into weeks. The case against her was dropped to civil status when she failed to appear. Ethan cooperated fully. He confessed everything, the forged doctor, the lies, the social media manipulation. He cried in the witness room, begging me to forgive him. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just emptiness. I said, forgiveness isn't something I owe. It's something you earn. He nodded, silent. Months later, I received a letter from the court. All charges dismissed. My name cleared. Assets unfrozen. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a quiet sigh after a storm. I went outside that evening, the same porch where she'd stood the night she vanished, and watched the sun set over the snow-covered street. For a moment, I thought I heard her voice again, faint, whispering from the wind. Maybe it was memory, maybe it was guilt, or maybe some people never really leave. But 2 months later, when a letter arrived postmarked from another state, signed in her unmistakable handwriting, I realized the war wasn't over yet. It was a quiet morning in early spring when the letter arrived. No fanfare, no warning. Just a plain white envelope slipped through the mail slot, the kind you almost mistake for junk. I noticed it only because of the handwriting, elegant, looping, too familiar to be coincidence. Clara. I turned it over. No return address, just a faint postmark from Boise, Idaho. For a long while, I simply stared at it, my coffee cooling beside me. Part of me wanted to tear it up and throw it away. But curiosity, or maybe closure, got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably hers. Robert, you've won. If that's what you needed to hear, there it is. You were right about the money, about the lies, about me. But before you celebrate, there's something you should understand. None of this was ever just about greed. It was about him. Ethan was drowning long before I came along. You taught him to depend on you, to take without earning, to believe that love was something he could buy. You built a cage of kindness and called it care. I just lived in it long enough to see the bars. When I lied, when I pushed, when I forged that report, it wasn't only for money. It was to make him stand up for himself. To make you finally let go. But you never could you? Even now, you're still holding on to your proof, your pride, your pain. Don't bother finding me. You'll never see me again. I'm not sorry for what I did, but I am sorry for what it turned you into. Clara. I read it 3 times before setting it down. No threats, no pleas, no apology that sounded like one. Just a confession written like a sermon. For a long time, I sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock. Ordinary sounds that suddenly felt unbearably loud. I thought about everything she'd written. About Ethan, the boy who'd once held my hand crossing the street, who'd looked up to me like I was made of iron, and how, somewhere along the way, I'd mistaken protection for love. Was she right? Had I built the cage myself? The next day, Ethan came by. He looked thinner, quieter, the kind of quiet that only comes after too many sleepless nights. He saw the letter on the table and froze. "She wrote to you too?" I nodded. "So you got one." He sank into the chair opposite me. "She sent me a different one. Said she was sorry. Said she needed to start over somewhere new." "Did she say where?" He shook his head. "No. And I don't think she ever will." For the first time in months, we sat together without arguing. No accusations. No paperwork between us. Just two men, father and son, bound not by victory or loss, but by what they'd both lost in between. After a long silence, Ethan spoke. "I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out how everything got this bad. I want to fix things, Dad. Not money, not the house. Us." I looked at him, really looked at him. The same eyes as when he was 10 years old, standing by the pond behind our house, scared to dive in. "Then start by standing on your own," I said softly. "That's all I ever wanted for you." He nodded, his eyes glassy. "I know. I just wish it didn't take all this to understand it." When he left, I sat for a long time in the quiet, staring at the letter again. The edges had already begun to curl slightly. Clara was gone, maybe for good, but her words had cut deeper than any legal battle could. Because beneath all her cruelty, there was a kernel of truth I couldn't ignore. I'd spent my life building safety nets, and somewhere along the line they'd become shackles. In the weeks that followed, I sold the second property, donated part of my estate to a local scholarship fund, and closed 2 of my investment accounts. It wasn't penance. It was release. Every sunset since then feels a little quieter. Every room a little emptier, but in a way that feels earned. Sometimes, I still think about her. About the way her voice shook when she said, "You'll die alone." Maybe she was right. Maybe solitude is the final price of control. But there's peace in it too, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to prove. A month later, I received one final envelope. No name, no letter inside, just a photograph of a small cabin by a lake, sunlight filtering through pine trees, a red scarf draped across the porch railing. Her scarf. I smiled faintly and set it in the drawer beside my desk. No police report, no call to Ethan. Some ghosts are better left wandering. I poured myself a drink, walked out to the porch, and watched the dusk settle over the quiet street. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel haunted, just free. In the end, Clara was right about one thing. Victory was never about who kept the money. It was about who could finally let go.